There were a lot of questions about Tommy Lloyd and his recruiting when it comes to Arizona basketball. He answered those, and he answered those in a big way with Carter Bryant and Jamari Phillips, and they are both exploding and both playing awesome basketball to this point. But let's talk more about it here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk a little bit, and thanks for making it your first listen of the day. Let's talk a little bit of Carter Bryant. Let's talk a little bit of Jamari Phillips in this 2024 class, because I do believe that this could be a rather historic class for Arizona. Now, the first thing is, where does Carter Bryant, again, we talked about him quite a bit on Monday, but we got to talk a little bit about just the importance of what he does mean to this program. The first thing, though, that you got to look at and you got to understand is that Carter Bryant is again, this is the kind of guy that Sean Miller was getting on a regular basis. No matter what you think of Sean Miller, he could obviously recruit. And Carter Bryant was very much in that category as far as players that were highly rated guys that Miller would generally get. Tommy Lloyd's gotten this dude. Now, as only has Tommy Lloyd gotten him, he is a perfect fit, because here's what Carter Bryant can do. He can move without the ball. He can pass. He can facilitate. He can shoot. He can just do a lot of different things. He is what an NBA small forward is supposed to look like. Again, We've used the Jason Tatum comparison. I think that's a pretty good comparison, to be honest with you. But he also lets the game come easy to him. He doesn't need to have a ton of different plays ran for him. He's not high maintenance. He doesn't need to do any of that nonsense right there. He is just a good basketball player, and he's the kind of player that Tommy Lloyd, I think, will really like, because he's not ball dominant. He's got a very, very big head, or a good head for the game, and again, just the dude that I think there's a lot to like about it right here. And not only is there a lot to like about him, I think there's also a lot to there's just kind of a lot to say there's a lot to like about him right there. And I'm a big fan of what he can do. I do think that Tommy Lloyd obviously prioritized him for a reason, and the reason that he prioritized him is because he can play, and he was a big get, because players like this all have kids are all fans of certain players growing up. That's just the way it is. Carter Bryant is that dude. Carter Bryant is he's been on the national radar for quite a while now, and I guarantee you that there's kids coming up that look up to Carter Bryant, and it starts making you look at Arizona a little bit. It's just the way it is. And not only is it make you look at Arizona a little bit, it also fascinates you, though, as well, that not only is Arizona there, but at the same time, it makes it cool, because a lot of people had questions about Carter Bryant, Tommy Lloyd's recruiting. And you know what? Some of those I think were, I think some of them were fair. I think that he misplayed a few recruitments. He still had to figure some things out, but he obviously gets it. Dudes like Tommy Lloyd, who are smart, who are adaptive, they get basketball, they get the recruiting world. And I think that's why you don't really worry too much about him right there. Now, I think with Arizona, the one thing you look at is, who could be that? What could really this movement be, this springboard right here? And Jamari Phillips is going to be right there in that as well. Jamari Phillips, again, he's not rated as highly as Carter Bryant, but I'm glad, though, that some schools are coming around, or some entities are coming around on him and giving him the due and the justice that he so deserves right there. Because, again, he is, for a while, he was rated in the mid-30s. He's a better player than that. He just is. And not only is he a better player than that, he's a significantly better player than that. And I think now 24/7, I believe, has him at 16 or 17. That feels much, much better than where he was rated before. That it just felt it just feels that Right now, Arizona will get both these dudes. And not only will they get both these guys, I think they're going to be stars from day one. And that's what we're going to talk about, what you can really expect. Sorry, we're having a few internet problems here. But what can you really expect from these guys? The first thing that I think you can expect from Carter Bryant is he might be a 2-year player. Keep in mind, he's got a great family system right there. Deshaun Bryant played at Long Beach State. Really, really good coach as well. His brother Trayvon was a McDonald's All-American, went to Missouri out of Long Beach. Both big-time, obviously, players. They've been around the block. They know exactly what's going on. And they're not going to, if Carter Bryant needs 2 years, then they'll get 2 years. Make no mistake, Carter Bryant's an NBA player, but he's also got the right people in his corner that also know that, all right, it might take him a little bit longer. And you know what? If he's got to be there 2 years, then he'll be there 2 years. The NBA is always going to be there for him. But from a statistical perspective, I think as a freshman, you're probably looking at 12-5, maybe 12-5-3, 12-5-4. He's got some real facilitating nature to him, which is very impressive, obviously. That's kind of what I'm looking at, though, for him from Carter Bryant, is somewhere in that realm, though, about 12-5-4. And then, obviously, if you get him back for a sophomore year, then you're probably looking at first-team All-American status. You're probably looking at 20 points, 7 rebounds, 4 or 5 assists, something like that. Then, when it comes to Jamari Phillips, I think Jamari Phillips is going to be ready to rock and roll from day one. I really do. Now, he's probably not quite the prospect that Carter is because he's a little bit shorter, but he's also got so many skills that that just transfer perfectly to this day and age of college basketball. And not only that, he's a 3-level scorer. He can get to the rim, he can shoot the three, and he can pull up from mid-range. A lot of times you get players who are kind of limited, who aren't able to do, one of those three. With Jamari Phillips, the one thing about him is that, let's be honest here. With Jamari Phillips, the one thing is people had questions about his athleticism. They shouldn't. He's throwing down tomahawks in traffic. He can do, again, he's athletically, he is more than good enough. He is more than capable. He is an above average athlete. There's no real problems with him at all. Now, from a statistical perspective, what should we expect? We're going to talk about that here in just a second, as there are a lot of interesting things, though, that we can talk about. But first, FanDuel. FanDuel right now. Now, we just had the NBA draft. That's over, but you're going to have the NFL right around the corner. What's more enjoyable than watching football and betting on it? That's where FanDuel comes in. Check it out, FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. All kinds of fun stuff right there. And not only all kinds of fun stuff, but it's your money's good with it. FanDuel's been around forever. And not only has FanDuel been around forever, FanDuel is also the spot, though, where you can go and you can bet a lot of different you can bet on a lot of different stuff and make it enticing at the same time. I'm like I said, super, super excited for football to be here. But in the meantime, FanDuel is going to get me through a lot of this. So again, check it out, FanDuel. All right, come back with us. We're going to talk more about what we should expect from Jamari Phillips in year 1 or year 2. Thanks for making Locked On Wildcats your first listen of the day. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right. Now, there's going to be a little bit of a shorter pod today. We're having a few internet problems over here. But the Jamari Phillips, though, as a freshman, he's going to be a double-digit scorer. I don't know how much, but he could easily be 12 points, 13 points, something like that. But not only that, he's going to be able to get to where he needs to on the court. He's already an incredibly polished basketball player. And when I mean incredibly polished, I mean, again, very, very strong, very succinct out there. His movements, how he gets to where he needs to get to on the court, all of that Jamari Phillips has in spades. And not only that, he's like I said, he's just kind of a next level type talent right there. I think that he's probably a 2-year player. Again, he's definitely an NBA guy. Watch him. You can just tell, But I do think that he's probably a 2-year player. And I think by that time that he's a sophomore, you're looking at the high teens, something like that. And a player that could potentially lead the conference in scoring. He's that good. He's got that kind of ability. And then you're going to be able to fill out that 2024 class. You're going to have some other options. A player like Tunde Yes, Fu might be he might reclassify. There were some rumblings about that. You got some other options there in 2024, but the linchpins you have for that class are already in there. These are your two cornerstone players, and not only are these your two cornerstone players, these are the two players that you are going to be the backbone, and they check off all the boxes. We're going to talk about those boxes here in just a second. Let's keep it locked on Wildcats. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I'm your host, Mike Luke. All right, Carter Bryant, Jamari Phillips, they check off all the boxes like we were just talking about. High character kids, come from great families, scorers, understand the game of basketball. There's a high IQ level to them as well. There's just a lot to really like about what they're able to do. And I think kind of the next step is that the next step is who can you add in that 2024 class, and how can you capitalize on that? Because a lot of it is a lot of this is, quite frankly, is word of mouth. Kids, especially in Southern California, it's always going to be your recruiting grounds. If they do well, if they do well and they talk about young kids coming up and they're like, hey, man, you should check this one out. You should check this school out. That's always going to be a good look. And I think this is a big part of what Arizona needs to do. They need this to be a good look for them right there. And I expect this to be. All right. I do apologize. Like I said, it's a little bit of a shorter show today, having a few internet problems here. But as always, really appreciate you guys keeping it locked on Wildcats and making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Mike Luke. You've been listening to Locked On Wildcats, and we will be back with you